My name is Leonard Hayes, but everyone just calls me Leo now. I am 89 years old. I have no job, no title, no home, only memories that ache more than these old bones. Once I was a carpenter. I built houses, carved stair rails with hands that were strong and sure. Now my fingers tremble just holding a few coins. This morning I woke up with hunger clawing at my stomach. So I walked into a cafe hoping for a simple sandwich to quiet the pain. As I stepped through the door, people turned away. Their eyes didn't see a man who once had a life of family dreams. They only saw an old beggar dragging his feet across their polished floor, daring to exist where he wasn't welcome. I shuffled forward each step, scraping across the cafe floor like sandpaper on stone. The smell of roasted coffee beans floated in the warm air, mingling with the perfume of women in tailored coats and the scent of leather shoes polished to perfection. To them, I was just a blemish in their morning ritual. An unwanted stain on pristine marble. My name is Leonard Hayes, but no one here knows that. To them, I am only the shaking hands, clutching coins, the hunched spine, the ragged coat, too thin for winter's cruelty. They don't see the boy who once ran barefoot through wheat fields under the gold of summer suns. They don't see the young man who kissed his wife under apple blossoms and promised her a house he would build with his own 2 hands. They don't see the father who carved wooden animals for his son Raphael and painted them with colors that made the boy's eyes dance with wonder. All they see is what's left of me. I reached the counter. My fingers fumbled numb with age and cold as I placed my coins on the scratched glass. The woman behind it, Marcella, her name tag read, looked down at me with eyes as cold as the wind outside. She crossed her arms, her stained apron stiff against her chest. "What do you want, old man?" she snapped. I swallowed, feeling my throat burn with humiliation. "Please, just the cheapest sandwich you have," I said, my voice cracking like dry wood under an axe. Marcella scoffed, glancing at the coins with disdain. Her lips curled into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. "This isn't a homeless shelter. If you don't have money, don't eat." The words hit me harder than the winter air. Behind me, I heard whispers, quiet laughter. Someone muttered, "Disgusting. Why does he even come in here?" Another voice snickered. "Look at those shoes. You can see his toes. He probably stinks." I wanted to turn and scream. I once built houses like the one you live in. I once held my wife in these arms. I once had a son who called me hero. But my voice died before it could rise. Instead, I stood there swaying slightly, gripping the counter as my knees threatened to buckle. My stomach twisted with hunger, a pain so deep it felt like it gnawed at my bones. I tried to gather my coins back into my shaking hands. "Please," I whispered. "Anything you can give me. I'm hungry." Marcella leaned forward, her eyes sharp as broken glass. "We don't have leftovers here. Go somewhere else." The cafe went silent except for the low hum of coffee machines steaming milk and the hiss of people's judgments. No one spoke for me. No one stepped forward. My dignity bled out slowly in front of them, drop by silent drop, staining the air with humiliation they pretended not to smell. Behind me, someone let out a low laugh. "That's right. Get out of here, old man. We don't want your company." My eyes burned, but no tears fell. I had forgotten how to cry years ago. Tears are for those who believe someone might wipe them away. I turned my coins, rattling in my pocket like broken teeth. My legs felt heavy, as if every year I'd lived had turned to stone and anchored me to the ground. Then the cafe door opened again. A gust of cold air swept through fluttering napkins and tugging at scarves. Footsteps, confident and sharp, echoed across the tiles. I didn't look up. There was no reason to. People like her never looked at people like me. But then a voice cut through the silence, low and commanding, vibrating with something I hadn't heard, directed at me in a long time. Anger that wasn't for me, but for my sake. What's going on here? The room shifted. I heard chairs creak as people turned. I heard Marcella's voice suddenly smaller, stammering, "Celeste, it's nothing. Just this man." Slowly, I lifted my gaze. She stood there in a dark wool coat lined with silver buttons, her brown hair pinned into a sleek twist. Her eyes dark as midnight, but burning with morning sun, locked onto mine. "Don't worry, sir," she said, her voice softening as she turned to me. "Today, your lunch is on me." Something inside my chest cracked open. The dam I had built over years of silent pain trembled under the force of that one simple kindness. My lips moved, but no sound came. My fingers trembled harder, clutching my few coins like a drowning man clutching driftwood. "Keep it," she said, gently pushing my hand back toward me. "Please." Marcella tried to protest, her voice dripping with wounded pride. But Celeste didn't even look at her. Her gaze remained on me, steady and warm like a fire I hadn't sat beside in decades. "Come," she said, beckoning me to a table near the window. "Sit. Eat. You deserve at least that." Deserve. The word wrapped around my heart like a bandage. I followed her slowly, my knees weak, my chest tight, with a pain that felt almost like hope. As I sat down, the cafe resumed its hum, but something was different. The laughter stopped. The whispers died, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of my existence lighten. Not because my life had changed, but because someone finally saw I was still alive. She ordered me a sandwich and a cup of hot coffee. As I sat there, the trembling in my hands made the cup rattle against the saucer. I tried to keep my eyes low, tried not to meet hers for too long. People like her didn't linger in the lives of people like me. This was charity, and charity was fleeting. But then she spoke, her voice low, uncertain, almost afraid of its own question. "Sir, may I see your watch?" My head snapped up. For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard right. My watch, I looked down at my wrist. The old leather strap was cracked, the glass scratched and cloudy. Most people didn't even notice it, just another relic clinging to an old man's withered arm. But her eyes, they were locked onto it. Wide, searching, almost terrified. Slowly, I unfastened the strap and handed it to her. Her fingers closed around it delicately, as if it were a piece of spun glass. She turned it over, brushing away the dirt with her thumb. Then she froze. Her shoulders stiffened, her lips parted. I saw her eyes glaze with a pain so raw it felt like looking into a mirror. "Where did you get this?" she whispered, her voice breaking. I swallowed hard, feeling the old grief swell in my chest. It was a gift," I said, my words trembling like the rest of me. "A gift from my son, Raphael." At his name, she gasped, a strangled, wounded sound that seemed torn from somewhere deep inside her. She pressed her palm to her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. The cafe fell away around us, the hiss of milk steamers, the clink of cups, the low murmur of conversation, all blurred into a dull roar. Only her eyes and my watch remained real. "Raphael," she breathed. "Your son was Leonard Hayes," I nodded slowly, confusion mingling with the ache in my chest. Yes, he died many years ago. After he left, nothing was ever the same." Her tears fell one by one, splashing onto the scratched glass face of the watch. She didn't wipe them away. Her fingers curled tighter around the metal, as if afraid it might vanish. Her shoulders shook as she tried to hold herself together. "He was everything to me," she said, her voice hoarse. "I loved him. I loved him so much. My chest constricted, every old wound splitting open at once. This woman, this strong, composed woman in her elegant coat, was looking at me with eyes full of grief that mirrored my own. My voice was barely a whisper. "You knew my Raphael?" She nodded, choking back sobs. "I didn't just know him. I loved him. He was my whole world once." The sandwich sat untouched before me, steam curling into the silence between us. My hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white and bloodless. "Why didn't I ever know about you?" I asked, though the words felt heavy, lodged deep in my chest. She looked at me with an expression that tore through every barrier I had built in my lifetime. "Because they never let me near him in the end," she whispered. "Because I wasn't enough. But he loved you so deeply. He spoke of you like you were a giant, a man of unbreakable strength." Her words shattered me. Raphael, my boy, spoke of me like that, even when I failed to protect him from this world's cruelty. I watched as she cradled the old watch in her hands, her tears falling onto its face like tiny stars. And in that moment, a truth long buried clawed its way back into the dying chambers of my heart. Raphael had loved her, and she had loved him. Whatever happened between them, whatever drove them apart, had left wounds deeper than either of us could ever heal alone. She placed the watch gently back on the table, sliding it toward me with trembling fingers. "Keep it," she whispered. "It was yours before it was ever mine. But may I visit you again, please? There are so many things I need to tell you about Raphael." I nodded, unable to speak, as tears finally blurred my vision. Tears I thought I'd lost decades ago. Outside the window, snow began to fall soft and silent, covering the harshness of the streets in fleeting purity. And for the first time in years, I felt something other than hunger or sorrow. I felt my son's memory returning to me through the voice of a woman who loved him just as deeply as I did. And in that fleeting moment, surrounded by strangers and bitter coffee, I felt less alone. As Celeste sat there, trembling, holding the scratched watch between her fingers, her phone vibrated sharply on the table. Startled, she glanced down. The caller ID showed an unknown number. With her heart pounding, she answered, expecting a client or staff. But the voice on the other end was low, rough, and sent chills down her spine. "If you care about Raphael's legacy," the voice growled, "stop asking questions about his death. He wasn't who you think he was, and neither are you." The line went dead before she could respond. She sat frozen, gripping her phone, her breath shallow and ragged. Across from her, Leo stared at her pale face, confusion clouding his eyes. But in Celeste's mind, only one thought echoed like thunder in a silent night. What secret did Raphael die with, and why am I in danger now? I stared at Leo as tears burned behind my eyes. The cafe around us blurred into a dull haze of clinking cups, the hiss of steaming milk, and murmured conversations fading into static. All I could see was the face of Raphael in my memory, his quiet smile, the way he would tilt his head slightly when teasing me, the way he said my name like a prayer whispered into darkness. "He told me about you." I whispered to Leo, my voice cracking under the weight of grief I had carried alone for so long. "He told me his father was kind, that you carved wooden animals for him when he was little, that you'd stay up late helping him with math when he couldn't concentrate. He missed you so much." Leo's eyes glistened with tears, but he didn't let them fall. His lips quivered into a sad, proud smile. "And he loved you," he said softly. "I can see it in your eyes. But Margaret never accepted you, did she?" I shook my head, feeling old memories claw their way up from the depths. Each one felt raw, ragged, like skin scraped open by gravel. She hated me from the first moment we met, I said, my voice trembling. To her, I was nothing. A girl from nowhere with no name, no legacy, no family that mattered. Raphael tried so hard to make her see me as he did. He defended me every time she insulted me. But every time he did, it was like she dug her claws deeper into his heart, twisting him into knots of guilt. I drew a shaky breath as my chest tightened painfully. The night he died, we were driving back from the city. He just told me he was going to leave everything behind, that he didn't care about the inheritance, the family name, any of it. He said he wanted to build a life with me, away from her expectations, away from the poison of that house. We were laughing. My voice cracked as tears spilled down my cheeks. I was holding his hand when the headlights came at us. Leo reached out his gnarled hand, resting lightly on mine, grounding me in this cold present. The skin of his palm was paper-thin, but his grip felt strong, steady, like Raphael's used to feel around mine. When I woke up in the hospital, he was gone, I whispered, staring at the table between us, seeing only the blood-streaked glass of that night. Margaret came to see me once. She stood at the foot of my bed, immaculate as ever, her pearls gleaming in the fluorescent light. She looked at me like I was dirt on her shoes. She said it should have been me instead. Leo's shoulders slumped, his entire frame sagging, as if the weight of all his years had doubled in a single breath. His eyes closed, and for a moment I saw him not as an old man, but as a father crushed under the grief of losing his only son. She never forgave me, I said, my voice hoarse and breaking. She told everyone I was the reason Raphael died, that I distracted him, that I ruined him, that I killed him. A single tear slid down Leo's wrinkled cheek, his jaw clenched, trembling with grief and rage. She was wrong, he whispered, his voice shaking but firm. Raphael made his own choices. He chose you. He loved you. And she took that love and twisted it into something ugly so she wouldn't have to face her own emptiness. I nodded slowly, feeling my chest tighten with a grief so old it felt like it had grown into my bones. I tried to go to his funeral, I said. I showed up at the church gates, but when I arrived, she had me thrown out. She told me I didn't belong there, that I was nothing to him. I screamed at her, begged her to let me see him one last time, but she turned away. And in that moment, I believed her. I believed I was nothing. Leo squeezed my hand weakly. No, he said, his voice breaking with the force of conviction. You were everything to him. Everything. I see it now. I see it in your eyes, in your tears, in the way you say his name. I closed my eyes as tears spilled down my cheeks, hot and uncontained. For years, I had carried the guilt, the shame, the loneliness like stones in my chest. For years, I believed her words. Believed I was unworthy of love, of belonging, of mourning him as my own. But in that moment, sitting across from the father of the only man I ever truly loved, I felt something shift, something loosen, something uncoil from around my heart. Because as Leo's trembling fingers held mine as his tears fell silently onto the scratched café table between us, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. I felt seen. I felt remembered. I felt like Raphael's love hadn't died with him after all. It lived here between two grieving souls who finally found each other in the quiet ruins of what Margaret tried to destroy. Outside the window, snow began to fall, soft and silent, covering the harshness of the streets in fleeting purity. The world blurred white with forgiveness, and for the first time in years, I felt less alone. Leo guided me through the frost-bitten park, his steps slow and uneven, dragging decades of sorrow behind each movement. The air was sharp with winter, each breath slicing into my lungs like glass. Bare trees stretched black skeletal fingers towards a pale sky, their branches trembling under thin coats of frost. The benches were empty except for one. There beneath the gnarled limbs of an ancient oak sat a woman hunched in a faded wool coat. Her hair, once black as obsidian, now fell around her face in unkempt gray strands. She held a paper cup of cheap coffee between trembling hands, staring blankly ahead at nothing. Her body was so still she seemed carved from stone. My chest tightened painfully. Margaret. She didn't see us at first. Only when Leo spoke her name softly, like he was afraid of waking a sleeping tiger, did her head jerk up. Her eyes, those same sharp eyes that once cut through me like shards of glass, widened in surprise. They were sunken now, ringed with shadows and silence so heavy it pressed down on my ribs until I thought they would crack under the weight. Then her lips twisted, and a strangled, guttural scream tore from her throat. "You!" She spat, her voice cracking with fury and age. "You dare come here? After what you did, after you stole Raphael from me." Her words struck like whips, tearing through my composure, reopening wounds I had buried under layers of forced strength and practiced resilience. "I didn't steal him," I said, my voice trembling but clear. "I loved him." "Lies," she shrieked, her whole body shaking with rage. People walking their dogs or pushing strollers turned to stare, but she didn't care. Tears streamed down her lined cheeks, carving dark, glistening rivers through the dirt and weariness of her skin. "You ruined him. You took him from me. He was my son, my only son. And because of you, he's gone." I stepped forward, feeling my knees shake under me. The frozen grass crunched softly beneath my boots. "Yes," I whispered, my breath fogging between us. "He's gone. And there hasn't been a single day I haven't woken up wishing it had been me instead." Her eyes flickered with confusion, a momentary fracture in her rage before darkening again with hatred. "Don't pretend to care. You have a life, money, power. You moved on. But me, I lost everything." My tears finally fell hot against my freezing cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. "You're right. I did move on. I built something out of what was left of me. But I never stopped loving him. And seeing you like this, it breaks me in ways you will never understand." She sobbed, curling in on herself like a dying animal. Her shoulders shook with the weight of grief that no longer had the strength to turn into rage. Leo reached out, resting a shaking hand on her thin shoulder. His voice was soft, cracking with emotion he could no longer contain. "Margaret," he said, tears glimmering in his weary eyes. "She's not our enemy. She loved Raphael like we did." Margaret shook her head violently, her tears dripping onto her lap, but her sobs grew weaker, dissolving into tired, broken gasps. Her paper coffee cup fell from her hands, thudding softly onto the frozen grass. I don't know how to let go of this pain," she whispered, her voice small and brittle like thin glass about to shatter. I knelt in front of her. The frozen ground bit into my knees, sending cold agony shooting through my bones. I reached out, hesitant, and laid my hand over hers, feeling the tremor in her bones, the frailty of a woman who had spent her entire life fighting shadows no one else could see. "Then let me help you carry it." I whispered, my words trembling with grief and love. "Let me help you both. I can't change what happened. I can't bring him back. But I can give you a home, warmth, food, safety. Let me do that for him. For us." Her tears fell harder now. Her shoulders shook with silent grief that sounded louder than any scream. And then slowly she nodded, Not out of forgiveness, not yet, but out of surrender. Out of exhaustion from carrying hate that had hollowed her out for decades. Leo exhaled shakily beside her, his shoulders sagging with relief. His eyes closed as if a prayer he never dared speak had finally been answered. Together we helped Margaret rise. She felt so light, so frail in my arms, like a dying bird I was terrified of crushing. Her coat smelled of stale coffee and old perfume. As we walked away from that cold park bench, I felt Raphael walking beside us, a silent shadow of the boy he once was. His presence pressing softly against my heart. And in that moment, under the dying winter sun, I realized forgiveness doesn't come as thunder or revelation. Sometimes it comes as an old woman broken by grief, finally letting herself be led away from the darkness, if only for today. That night, after bringing Leo and Margaret back to my apartment, I lay awake on the sofa, staring up at the cracked plaster ceiling in the dark. Their soft breathing drifted from the guest room, two frail rhythms rising and falling like trembling candle flames. I listened to them each inhale and exhale so fragile, it felt like it could be blown away by a sigh. Outside the city pulsed with distant sirens and the low electric hum of streetlights buzzing against the frozen glass. The shadows of rain-streaked branches moved across the ceiling like skeletal hands. I thought of Raphael, of his quiet laugh so soft it almost felt like a secret, of the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, making the world feel warm and safe and honest for once. I pictured him standing in the doorway of my old shop coat, dripping with rain hair, curled damp against his forehead, smiling at me like I was the only person who mattered. My chest ached with the force of missing him. A dull, unending ache I had learned to carry like a second spine. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. The sound split the silence like a blade. I glanced at the screen. 1:37 a.m. Calls at this hour were never good. My stomach twisted as I reached for it, dread coiling tight under my ribs. "Hello," I whispered into the darkness, my voice thin and wary. For a moment there was only silence. I thought I heard faint static, the hiss of empty air. Then a voice spoke, low, raspy, devoid of human warmth. A voice that sounded like it had been soaked in poison for so long it had forgotten what kindness tasted like. Celeste Marlowe. My breath caught in my throat. I sat up straight, the blanket sliding off my shoulders, pooling at my waist. My pulse hammered so loud I could barely hear. "Who is this?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady, but it trembled despite me. A quiet chuckle crackled through the line. Cold, hollow, like wind rattling dead leaves. Still playing the grieving lover after all these years, the voice sneered softly. "You really have no idea what you've stepped into, do you?" I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry as ash. "What are you talking about?" The voice darkened the words, dropping into my ear like stones into deep water, each one sinking straight to the pit of my stomach. Raphael wasn't who you think he was. He wasn't just some golden boy in love with a pretty boutique girl. He had commitments, secrets that should stay buried. If you keep digging into his death, if you keep trying to drag his past back into the light, you'll find truths that will ruin everything you've built. My fingers clenched so tightly around the phone I felt the plastic creak under my grip. I forced the words out through clenched teeth. "Is that a threat?" Pause. Silence stretched so long I thought they might have hung up. Then I heard it, the faintest sound of breath, and I imagined whoever it was smiling in the dark, their teeth bared like a wolf's. "It's a promise," the voice whispered. "Walk away, Celeste. Before what happened to Raphael happens to you." The line clicked dead. Silence roared in my ears, louder than the city beyond the window. For a moment, I just sat there, phone pressed to my cheek. my whole body trembling with adrenaline and terror and grief that now burned with a new edge rage. Slowly, I lowered the phone to my lap. My hands were numb, my fingertips pale with bloodless fear. Across the living room, Leo stirred in his sleep, murmuring Raphael's name into the quiet, his voice cracked with dreams and memory. I clenched my fists until my nails cut into my palms, feeling the sting anchor me back into my body. My eyes burned with unshed tears, but I forced them back. There was no time for weakness now. They killed him. They killed him, and now they were coming for me. Outside the window, dawn began to bleed into the city skyline, dark red and silent like a wound opening across the sky. And in that crimson light, I made a vow if they thought Raphael's secrets would die with him. They were about to learn how wrong they were. At dawn, after another sleepless night in the cabin's cold silence, I stood by the kitchen window, staring out into the fog-thick forest. The world was gray and hushed. The pines bowed under the weight of frost, silent sentinels guarding secrets too old to name. Steam curled from my coffee mug, burning my throat, as it slid down, scalding but grounding me back into my trembling body. Leo sat at the old oak table behind me, his hands wrapped around his chipped mug knuckles, pale eyes hollow with worry. He looked so small in that oversized cardigan shoulders, hunched against a fear he couldn't name but felt all the same. Margaret dozed fitfully on the worn sofa, her breathing ragged and shallow, every exhale sounding like a confession whispered to ghosts. I stared into the mist until tears blurred the pine trunks into shifting shadows. I couldn't keep running. Each mile I put between myself and the truth only made the darkness behind me grow hungrier. Whatever Raphael had been tangled in, whoever wanted me silent, it wouldn't stop until one of us was gone. I walked to the rickety desk against the far wall, pulled my laptop from its battered case and booted it up. My fingers shook as I connected to a dark net contact, an old fixer who owed me favors from my corporate days investigating offshore fraud rings. Back then, secrets were just leverage. Now they were life or death. I typed with trembling certainty, I need everything on Project Helix. Full classified dumps, especially files on Leonard Hayes. Minutes later, the encrypted folder arrived. My pulse roared in my ears as I decrypted it, the screen flickering under my flickering breath. The first files were code names, asset lists, transfer logs from black budget accounts that didn't officially exist. Then photos. Raphael in tactical blacks, standing beside men I didn't recognize. Cold-eyed military contractors in desert camo and body armor faces, half-shadowed under caps, each one radiating the quiet, precise violence of men who kill without question. Raphael's expression was calm, resigned, his eyes carrying a grief I'd never seen in him before. Then I found it. A blurry scan of an internal memo stamped in jagged red top secret. Project Helix Termination Report. My eyes flew down the page, words slamming into my chest like hammer blows. Operative Hayes compromised during extraction, target data secured, termination authorized to contain breach. Termination authorized. My vision blackened at the edges. The room spun around me, fading into a tunnel of choking rage and grief. They hadn't just let him die. They killed him. They executed him like a corrupted line of code, a disposable asset to erase once his usefulness ended. My hand clamped over my mouth to muffle the scream tearing up my throat. Tears spilled hot and silent down my face, dripping onto the keyboard. Grief roared in my chest like a wounded beast clawing through every rib. But beneath it, anger burned. Clean, righteous, sharp as winter steel. Then, at the bottom of the memo, a single line flickered in my mind, like a dying match striking in a dark tunnel. Backup data stored, location Bunker 9, Northern Ridge Facility. Backup data, proof, maybe his final messages. Maybe his last confession, the secret they killed him to keep hidden. My pulse thudded with a violent, reckless hope that tasted like blood on my tongue. I closed the laptop with trembling hands and wiped my face on my sleeve. When I turned, Leo was watching me silently, his mug untouched, sensing the shift in my energy like an old wolf smelling thunder in the wind. "What did you find?" he asked, his voice thin with fear. I met his eyes, seeing Raphael there for a flicker of a second, that same unwavering gaze that had once made me believe in a future beyond the scars of my past. I felt a cold steel settle in my chest. My grief crystallized into purpose. The truth I whispered. My voice came out calm, deadly calm. And I'm going to finish what Raphael started. I stood grabbing my black coat from the chair. The cold metal of Raphael's watch pressed against my wrist, heavy and solid, a silent vow binding me to him across the grave. Leo reached out, gripping my hand, his frail fingers curling around mine with desperate strength. "Be careful," he said, his voice breaking. "Whatever you're about to face, don't let it take who you are." I nodded once, blinking back the tears, burning hot behind my eyes. Outside, the fog was burning off under the rising sun, revealing the dark forest road winding north. I stepped out into the bitter morning air. Frost cracked under my boots. Pines loomed overhead, like cathedral pillars, silent witnesses to what I was about to become. They wanted me silent. They wanted him forgotten. But I would drag their secrets into the light even if it destroyed me. Because Raphael once died protecting the truth, and now I would kill to set it free. Night fell like a shroud by the time I reached Northern Ridge. The world beyond the tree line was swallowed in a blackness so complete, it felt like stepping outside existence itself. The dirt road ended miles back, forcing me to hike through brittle underbrush and the spongy carpet of dead pine needles under a moonless sky. My breath came in ragged clouds, fogging the visor of my tactical headset, each inhale tasting of metal and adrenaline. Raphael's watch felt heavy against my wrist, its cold steel pressing into my skin with every pulse of terror that thudded in my veins. Bunker 9 loomed ahead, carved into the granite cliffs like the mouth of some dead god. Half-buried blast doors rose from moss-choked concrete rust, bleeding down their steel faces into dark streaks. But beside them, the biometric scanner hummed with dim blue power, a snake's eye glowing in the dark. I knelt by the panel fingers, shaking. As I typed in the backdoor clearance codes, my fixer had risked everything to get me. The keypad flickered under my gloves, its plastic slick with dew. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. My stomach twisted with nausea and dread. Then, with a hydraulic hiss, the locks disengaged. The blast doors groaned open an inch at a time, exhaling a stale breath of mold and forgotten electricity. I stepped inside. My boots clanged on steel grates as I descended the narrow passage. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, their dying glow illuminating banks of silent monitors and racks of servers standing like tombstones in a graveyard of secrets. Wires slithered across the floor, disappearing into the dark like veins feeding a dead heart. I reached the central terminal, brushing away thick layers of dust from the keyboard. Cobwebs clung to my sleeves. The hum of dormant power vibrated under my palms. Closing my eyes, I drew in a shaking breath. Then I keyed in Raphael's operative code. The numbers burned into my memory from the stolen files, each digit a wound I would never heal. The screens flickered to life with a soft, electric sigh. Pale light spread across the bunker walls as classified data began to scroll in tight columns, the room filling with the quiet whir of spinning drives and awakened fans. Lines of encrypted text flew by until one folder made my breath hitch. Personal Message Archive Operative Hayes Final Transmission. My fingers hovered above the play key, trembling. Part of me wanted to run, to slam the laptop shut and bury these secrets forever. But another part, the part that still loved him beyond death or reason, needed to hear his voice one last time. I pressed play. The screen crackled, static fading into grainy footage. And there he was, Raphael sitting against a steel wall, tactical black fatigues streaked with dirt and blood, dark hair damp with sweat, eyes rimmed red, but blazing clear with resolve. My heart seized as his voice filled the silent bunker. Celeste, if you're seeing this, I'm gone. His lips twitched with the ghost of a sad smile. His hand trembled as he lifted it to wipe blood from his temple. I lied to you. I wasn't just a corporate liaison. I was an asset. Project Helix, it wasn't about cyber defense. It was about weaponizing biocyber AI, turning human minds into code, stripping them down to programs that could be deleted and rewritten at will. He swallowed hard, pain flashing in his eyes. I tried to stop them. I tried to leak the data to the UN Oversight Committee. That's why they're coming for me. A tear slipped down my cheek as I watched him breathe shakily, each exhale laced with pain. He leaned closer to the camera, his gaze burning into mine across time and death. They're going to kill me, Celeste. But before they do, I need you to know, loving you was the only thing I did that was real. Everything else was just noise. Static. You were my silence, my peace. His eyes flicked to the side as if he heard something. Boots in the corridor, guns being raised. He looked back at the camera, urgency sharpening his broken voice. Don't come looking for answers. Please. Live your life. Be free of this. Promise me you'll be free. And then gunfire. His head snapped sideways as the feed cut to black. Silence roared in my ears so loud it felt like the world was screaming. I sat frozen in the flickering glow of the monitors, tears streaming down my face. My chest felt hollowed out, scraped raw by grief so deep it was indistinguishable from rage. Slowly, I pressed my palm against the dead screen where his face had been, as if I could touch him one last time through the glass, through the dark, through death itself. I'm sorry, Raphael, I whispered into the silent bunker. My voice cracked like thin ice under a boot. But I can't walk away. Not now. Not ever. Outside, dawn began to bleed gray across the forest canopy, the blackness lightening into a world stripped bare of illusions. I wiped my tears with the back of my glove and pulled the data drive from the console, its sharp metal edges biting into my palm like a blade. They took him from me. They took his life and buried his truth under concrete and classified steel. But now I was carrying his final and I was about to set the world on fire. The days that followed blurred into quiet rhythms. Mornings carried the aroma of dark coffee blooming through the kitchen, mingling with the soft clink of spoons against porcelain mugs. Evenings wrapped themselves in amber lamplight, and the whisper of pages turning as Leo sat by the window, his glasses low on his nose, reading old philosophy books, with trembling fingers tracing faded lines. Margaret had begun to smile, not often and never without tears shining in the corners of her eyes. But it was a smile nonetheless fragile, as frost thawing under morning sun. I watched her fold warm laundry with shaking hands, humming half-forgotten hymns under her breath. Grief still clung to her thin shoulders like a worn shawl, But beneath it, something lighter stirred, tentative as the first crocus pushing through winter ground. Leo regained his strength in slow, quiet increments. Each day he walked a little further down the garden path, pausing under the gnarled pear tree Raphael once planted with me, his lined hand resting against its mottled bark, as if feeling his son's heartbeat within. When he came back inside, cheeks flushed pink from the cold air, he would touch my shoulder softly, his touch feather-light, as though reminding himself that we were both still here. That grief had not swallowed everything. One afternoon, as the sun dipped behind slate-gray clouds, and the living room filled with the scent of lemon oil